Behind the lavish gates of a grand estate lies a dark secret. Wanja. A woman seemingly living a perfect life of luxury and devotion, finds herself torn between love, betrayal, and forbidden desires. One fateful mistake shatters her world, leaving her to confront the wreckage of her choices. Will Wanja find redemption? Or will she be forever trapped in the shadows of regret? This gripping tale of passion and heartache will take you on a journey through the depths of human emotion. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay updated with more compelling and inspiring content on this channel. Once upon a time, in a serene and prosperous village, there lived a woman named Wanja. She resided in a grand, elegant house adorned with intricate carvings, lush drapes, and an air of timeless beauty. It was the kind of house that spoke of wealth, comfort, and stability, standing tall with its manicured gardens and sparkling fountains. She shared this home with her husband, Camuo, a man admired by all who knew him. Camuo was a prominent businessman, his ventures thriving with the precision of a well-tuned clock. His name was synonymous with success and respect, and he was deeply devoted to Wanja. He showered her with gifts that sparkled as brightly as the sun, listened to her with patience and care, and ensured that she never lacked for anything. To the outside world, Wanja's life seemed like a fairy tale, perfectly curated and enviable. The picturesque house, her adoring husband, and the life of plenty made her the epitome of fortune and grace in the eyes of their neighbors. But beneath the glittering surface, Wanja harbored a secret so profound it consumed her. While Camuo was attentive and kind, their love lacked the fire and intimacy she craved. His words were tender, his gestures gentle. Yet when night fell and they lay side by side, a vast chasm separated them. Camuo would turn away, slipping effortlessly into a deep slumber, leaving Wanja to wrestle with her thoughts. She would stare at the ceiling, longing for something he seemed incapable of giving, a touch that burned with passion. Words whispered in the dark, a connection that made her heart race and her soul soar. Each night, the silence of their room became a deafening reminder of what was missing. She yearned for her husband to hold her, to make her feel desired, to ignite the dormant flames of her spirit. But Camuo remained distant, his hands cold and unpracticed in the language of affection. Her heart ached with unfulfilled desires, a deep void growing within her despite the love she knew he bore for her. One sunny morning, while tending to the flowers in her vibrant garden, Wanja's life took an unexpected turn. As she bent down to inspect a blooming rose, her eyes caught sight of a new worker. His name was Kofi, and his presence was arresting. He was tall and muscular, with rugged features that hinted at a life of hard labor and resilience. His sun-kissed skin glistened as he worked, his movements exuding a raw, unrefined strength that stirred something deep within Wanja. Their first exchange was brief, a casual greeting and a polite smile, but it was enough to spark something in Wanja. For the first time in years, her heart beat with a fervor she thought she had lost. Kofi's voice, rough yet warm, lingered in her mind long after their encounter, and his piercing eyes seemed to see through her carefully constructed facade. From that day forward, Wanja found herself gravitating toward the garden more often. She would stroll among the flowers, feigning interest in the plants, her true purpose lying in the hope of crossing paths with Kofi. Their conversations were innocent at first, discussions about the weather, the best way to care for the roses, but there was an undercurrent of something far more profound. Their eyes locked a second too long, Their words carried unspoken meanings, and the air between them buzzed with unacknowledged tension. As time passed, the boundaries between them blurred. A stolen glance became a lingering touch. A polite smile transformed into a knowing look. One sultry afternoon, while Wanja sat beneath the shade of an ancient tree, Kofi approached with a mango in his hand, its vibrant orange skin gleaming in the sunlight. When he offered it to her, their fingers brushed ever so lightly, and the spark that shot through Wanja was undeniable. It was a moment so brief it could have been inconsequential, yet it set her entire world alight. Her nights became haunted by thoughts of Kofi, his voice, his touch, the way he looked at her as though she was the only woman in the world. She began creating excuses to be near him, her days revolving around fleeting moments that left her breathless and yearning for more. They found themselves drawn to hidden corners of the estate, where no prying eyes could find them. What started as harmless conversations grew into something far more dangerous, a connection laced with unbridled desire. Wanja's heart became a battlefield, torn between loyalty to her kind, loving husband and the forbidden passion that Kofi awakened in her. Guilt gnawed at her, a relentless shadow over her happiness. Yet she could not resist the allure of a man who embodied everything she had ever longed for. Kofi was a tempest, a force of nature that swept into her carefully ordered life and left chaos in his wake. On one hand, there was Kamuo, who had built a world of stability and care for her. On the other, there was Kofi, whose every glance and touch made her feel alive in ways she had never imagined. Wanja was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, teetering on the edge of a choice that could either shatter her life or set her free. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, the sky was set ablaze with streaks of bright orange and deep crimson, painting the heavens in fiery hues that seemed to pulse with life. The birds, so often chattering and lively, had gone silent, leaving only the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle evening breeze. The air felt thick, laden with an inexplicable tension, as if the earth itself held its breath, anticipating the arrival of something monumental. It was a moment that seemed both ordinary and extraordinary, as though the universe was on the cusp of revealing a profound secret. Kofi wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles aching from a day spent toiling under the relentless sun. His shirt clung to his back, damp and wrinkled, a testament to the hard labor that filled his days. Yet, when he caught sight of Wanja approaching, all weariness fled from his body. She moved gracefully through the golden light, her silhouette illuminated by the fading sun. Her eyes, vibrant and full of life, sparkled like the first stars that had begun to appear in the twilight sky. They met near the old barn, a familiar place steeped in the scents of hay and the rhythmic chorus of crickets. It was here, amidst the simple beauty of nature, that Wanja felt her heart pounding, a wild and erratic beat that seemed to echo the uncertainty within her. Was it excitement, fear, or some unnameable force that propelled her forward? She couldn't say. But the pull toward Kofi was irresistible. Every step brought her closer, and with each step, her breath grew quicker, her resolve thinner. When she reached him, no words passed between them. They stood in silence, the unspoken tension between them thick enough to be felt in the air. Kofi's calloused hands, worn from years of labor, reached out to rest gently on Wanja's waist. His touch was firm but tender, as though he feared she might shatter if held too tightly. Wanja felt her skin tingle beneath his hands, a sensation that was both thrilling and terrifying. Her breath hitched, mingling with his as they stood so close that she could smell the earthiness of his clothes and feel the warmth radiating from his body. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing until it encompassed only the two of them. Everything else, the chirping crickets, the rustling leaves, even the soft whispers of the wind, faded into nothingness. Their eyes met, locking in a gaze that carried all the weight of their unspoken feelings. For Wanja, it was a moment of suspended reality, as though they existed in a world apart, untouched by rules or consequences. The sparks between them were undeniable, an electric current that flowed through every fiber of her being. And then, as if drawn by an invisible force, Kofi leaned in. His lips brushed hers with a hunger that could no longer be restrained. The kiss was intense, an outpouring of emotions too long suppressed. Wanja's heart raced as her hands instinctively grasped at his shirt, pulling him closer, needing to feel the solidity of him against her. The kiss deepened, carrying with it a whirlwind of desire, longing, and something dangerously close to love. In that moment, nothing else mattered, only the fire that burned between them. When their lips finally parted, the spell was broken, and reality came crashing down around Wanja. A wave of guilt surged through her, cold and unrelenting. She had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. Her mind turned to George, the man who had stood by her side, offering her unwavering love and support. The memory of his kindness and devotion only made the guilt sharper, cutting through her like a blade. She felt torn, trapped between the safe, steady love of her husband and the wild, uncontainable passion she had found with Kofi. Desperate to regain her footing, Wanja tried to resume her daily life. She smiled at George, spoke to him with the same gentle tone, and played the role of the perfect wife. But inside, she was a storm, her thoughts a chaotic tangle of emotions she couldn't unravel. Every glance at Kofi, every accidental brush of their hands, reignited the fire within her, making it impossible to forget. She found herself caught in a cruel cycle, unable to let go of the past and powerless to resist the pull of the present. Kofi, emboldened by their stolen moments, began to push the boundaries further. He left small, cryptic notes for her in the garden, messages that only she could understand. Their clandestine meetings grew more frequent, each encounter more intense than the last. Wanja knew she was walking a dangerous path, but her heart and body betrayed her better judgment. The whispers among the servants grew louder, their curious and judgmental eyes following her every move. The estate buzzed with rumors, a quiet hum of scandal that threatened to explode into the open. George, ever trusting, seemed blissfully unaware, his love for Wanja blinding him to the storm brewing around them. But Wanja knew that secrets could not stay hidden forever. One evening, as she sat alone in the quiet stillness of their living room, George entered. His face was grave, his eyes shadowed with something unfamiliar, suspicion. He stood before her, his voice barely more than a whisper, but heavy with meaning. "I've been hearing things," he said, the words hanging in the air like a thundercloud. "People are talking. Wanja. They're saying things about you and Kofi." Wanja's heart stopped. She had anticipated this moment for weeks, even months. But no amount of preparation could have braced her for its arrival. Her breath hitched, her chest tightening as though caught in a vice. She tried to steady herself, to summon an air of innocence. But the weight of her guilt was an anchor, dragging her down. "It's just gossip," she stammered, her voice faltering under the strain of her lie. "There's nothing going on. And George. I swear." And George's eyes bore into hers. Searching. Pleading. Demanding the truth she was too afraid to reveal. His jaw tightened. His expression a storm of suspicion and sorrow. "I hope you're right," he said at last. His voice edged with doubt and pain. "Because if you're not, Wanja, this will destroy us." His words lingered in the air like the echoes of thunder after a lightning strike. And Wanja knew, he suspected far more than he let on. Despite George's warning, Wanja found herself spiraling deeper into her affair with Kofi. What had begun as fleeting glances and stolen moments now consumed her entirely. The magnetic pull between them was undeniable. Their clandestine meetings becoming more frequent and fervent. She felt as though she were living two lives, one dictated by duty and decorum, and another fueled by passion, secrecy, and rebellion. Kofi was no longer just a temptation, he was an obsession. A fire she could neither extinguish nor resist. Yet guilt gnawed at her. A relentless shadow that followed her every step. She was betraying the man who had given her his love. His trust. His everything. But the exhilaration of forbidden love, the thrill of walking so close to the edge, was intoxicating. Kofi made her feel alive in ways she never had before. Awakening parts of her she didn't know existed. The danger. The risk, it all added to the allure. Even as she knew the flames would eventually consume her. It happened on a Friday evening when the air was thick and heavy. The sky dark with the promise of a storm. All day, Wanja had felt a sense of unease. A subtle but insistent foreboding she couldn't shake. She had arranged to meet Kofi at their secret spot by the river. A secluded haven shielded by tall reeds and whispering trees. She slipped out of the house quietly. Her every movement measured and deliberate. Her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. As she neared the riverbank, a cold shiver ran down her spine. A premonition of disaster. Then she saw him, standing partially obscured by the trees. George's rigid silhouette emerged from the shadows. His face was a portrait of heartbreak and fury. His eyes locked on her with an intensity that froze her in place. Behind her, Kofi approached. His casual stride oblivious to the tempest that awaited them. The moment George's gaze shifted to Kofi, the air crackled with tension. George stepped forward. His voice low but trembling with raw emotion. "Wanja," he began. His tone fractured. "How could you?" His words cut through her like a blade. Each syllable laden with betrayal and anguish. His eyes flicked between her and Kofi, as if trying to piece together a puzzle he already understood. Wanja opened her mouth to respond. But no words came. The weight of the moment crushed her, rendering her mute as George's world unraveled before him. Without another word, George turned and walked away. His shoulders heavy with the burden of his discovery. Wanja's knees buckled, and Kofi reached out to steady her. But she recoiled from his touch. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "This was a mistake. I should never have let it get this far." Kofi's expression softened. A mix of hurt and resignation crossing his features. But he said nothing. He knew this was the end. When Wanja returned home, she found George sitting in the darkened living room, his face buried in his hands. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the sound of her hesitant footsteps. "I trusted you, Wanja," he said finally. his voice hollow, a mere echo of its former strength. I gave you everything I had. How could you do this to us? She tried to explain, to express the loneliness and emptiness that had driven her into Kofi's arms. But George raised his hand, cutting her off. I don't want your excuses, he said, his tone cold and final. You made your choice. Now we have to live with it. The days that followed were bleak. The home they had built together now a battleground of silence and resentment. George moved into the guest room, his presence a ghostly reminder of what they had lost. Conversations were reduced to strained, perfunctory exchanges. The warmth and laughter that had once filled their home were replaced by an oppressive quiet. Wanja's guilt became her constant companion, a heavy cloak she could never remove. She had shattered the foundation of her life, and there was no path to repair. Kofi's attempts to reach out were met with avoidance. The passion that had once ignited their secret meetings now felt tainted, a reminder of everything she had destroyed. Wanja felt trapped between the wreckage of her marriage and the hollow echoes of her affair. Each decision she faced seemed destined to inflict more pain on herself and on others. The scandal did not remain confined to their home. Gossip among the servants spread like wildfire, their whispers growing louder and more brazen. The rumors spilled beyond the estate, infiltrating the local community. Wanja could feel the weight of judgment wherever she went. Women who had once greeted her with warm smiles now turned away, their expressions cold and distant. Men exchanged knowing glances, their smirks a constant reminder of her fall from grace. George's professional life was not spared. His business partners began to withdraw, their faith in him shaken by the disgrace that now tainted his family's name. Years of hard work and respectability crumbled under the shadow of Wanja's indiscretion. She watched helplessly as the man she had once vowed to stand beside was stripped of everything he had built, her actions casting a long, dark shadow over his achievements. Wanja's world was in ruins, and she had no one to blame but herself. Every day brought new reminders of her mistakes, her betrayal. And as she sat alone in the empty, silent house, she wondered if she would ever find redemption, or if the scars of her choices would haunt her forever. One quiet evening, George summoned Wanja into his study. The room, dimly lit with a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls, felt heavier than usual. Wanja hesitated at the doorway, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure what awaited her but could sense it wasn't going to be easy. George sat behind his desk, his shoulders slumped and eyes burdened with exhaustion, the weight of the recent scandal and betrayal clearly etched on his face. Wanja, he began after a long, deliberate pause, his voice low and heavy. I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything. And I've come to a decision. I can't keep living like this. I've decided to file for divorce. The words landed like a hammer blow, shattering the fragile calm she had tried to maintain. Divorce. The finality of the word struck her core, leaving her breathless. Tears welled up in her eyes as she stepped forward, pleading desperately. George, please, don't do this. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can fix this, she implored, her voice breaking. But George was resolute. Wanja, you made your choice, he said, his tone steady but devoid of warmth. Now I have to make mine. I cannot continue in a marriage built on lies and deceit. I've tried to find a way forward, but there's nothing left. He turned away, signaling the end of their conversation. Crushed and heartbroken, Wanja left the room, her world crumbling around her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of pain and chaos. News of the impending divorce spread quickly, the scandal becoming the centerpiece of village gossip. Everywhere she went, she was met with whispers, judgmental stares, and outright condemnation. Friends distanced themselves, and her family, ashamed and unwilling to be drawn into the scandal, withdrew their support. She became a pariah, isolated and drowning in regret. And George, on the other hand, buried himself in work, trying to build a new life amidst the wreckage of his old one. He hoped the distraction would dull the pain, but it clung to him like a shadow. Every time he crossed paths with Wanja, the betrayal resurfaced, fresh and raw. He avoided her as much as possible, determined to move forward even as his heart remained fractured. In the depths of her despair, Wanja found an unexpected source of solace in Mama Mumbai, an elder in the community known for her wisdom and compassion. Mama Mumbai sought Wanja out, inviting her to her modest home on the outskirts of the village. "Child," she said, her voice soft but firm, "we all stumble in life. What defines us is how we rise after the fall. You can let this break you, or you can find the strength to rebuild." Wanja broke down, pouring out her guilt, shame, and the deep regret she felt. Mama Mumbai listened patiently, then said, "You cannot undo the past, but you can shape your future. Start by making amends, not just to end George, but to yourself. Only then can you begin to heal." Wanja clung to Mama Mumbai's words, realizing that wallowing in self-pity would achieve nothing. She resolved to confront her mistakes and take responsibility for the pain she had caused. With great trepidation, she sought out George, finding him in the garden one afternoon. He sat alone, lost in thought, his face etched with sorrow. "George," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I can never undo the damage I've caused. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. My actions were wrong, and I'll carry the weight of that regret for the rest of my life." George listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he spoke softly. "I hear your apology, Wanja. But forgiveness isn't something I can offer easily. I need time to heal, to understand what this means for me." His words offered no promises, but to Wanja, they were a small glimmer of hope. She knew the road to redemption would be long and uncertain, but she was determined to walk it. She threw herself into volunteer work, dedicating her time to supporting local women facing hardships. Slowly, the community began to take notice of her efforts, and the whispers of judgment softened. Meanwhile, Kofi, the man at the center of the scandal, quietly left the village. His departure brought a strange mixture of relief and sadness to Wanja. She recognized their relationship for what it was, a fleeting moment of passion that had cost her dearly. George wrestled with his own struggles. He wanted to move on, to let go of the anger and pain. But the betrayal lingered. Nights were the hardest, the quiet bringing back memories of happier times with Wanja, against the advice of friends and family urging him to find someone new. George realized he wasn't ready to let go completely. One evening, he sought out Wanja. "I don't know if we can ever be what we were," he admitted. "But I think we owe it to ourselves to try. To see if there's still something worth saving." Tears filled Wanja's eyes as she listened. "I'll do whatever it takes," she promised. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to work for a second chance. They agreed to seek counseling and rebuild their relationship step by step. The sessions were challenging, each one peeling back layers of hurt and resentment. But they persisted, determined to heal. Their journey was far from over. But they both understood that love and forgiveness required effort. Slowly, hope began to bloom again, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal with time and commitment. Together, they set out to reclaim the life they had almost lost. But slowly, with the counselor's gentle yet firm guidance, they began to peel back the layers of their pain and resentment, exposing the raw truths beneath. Kamal opened up about his deep-seated fears of inadequacy, his haunting feelings of failure as a husband, and the devastating blow Wanja's betrayal had dealt to his self-esteem. For the first time, his vulnerability was laid bare, and his words carried the weight of years of silent suffering. Wanja, too, found her voice. She spoke of the loneliness that had crept into her heart like a shadow, the emptiness that seemed to stretch endlessly within her. She confessed her yearning for the intimacy and connection they had once shared and expressed profound regret for her actions that had broken the trust between them. The room became a sanctuary for their raw emotions as they cried, argued, and sometimes sat in silence, trying to process the enormity of what had been said. Though the process was painful, it was also transformative. For the first time, they truly began to understand each other in ways they never had before. Each revelation was like a small, tentative step toward healing. And gradually, glimmers of hope began to pierce the darkness. They discovered moments of laughter buried in shared memories, found unexpected comfort in each other's presence, and started to rebuild the fragile foundations of their friendship. It was not easy, and the road ahead remained daunting. But for the first time in months, the future seemed less like a looming shadow and more like a horizon waiting to be explored. As their efforts to reconcile became known, the news spread through the community like wildfire. People's reactions were mixed. Some admired their courage and resilience, seeing in their struggle a testament to the power of love and redemption. Others remained skeptical, clinging to the scandal that had rocked their small village. Among the skeptics, whispers of doubt lingered, questioning the sincerity of their efforts. Yet, amidst the clamor, Wanja's work as a volunteer continued to flourish. With Kamal's hesitant blessing, she poured her energy into helping women in the community who had faced hardships, finding a sense of purpose and fulfillment that reignited her spirit. Her compassion and dedication slowly began to shift perceptions, even among those who had been most critical. Kamal, meanwhile, found solace in his work. His business partners, initially wary, started to notice changes in him. He appeared more focused, more present, and more at peace with himself. Gradually, his reputation began to recover, as did his standing within the community. Although the whispers had not entirely faded, a growing number of people began to see the strength in his and Wanja's determination to heal and move forward together. Just as it seemed they were finding their footing, a new challenge emerged. Kamal received an offer for a lucrative business deal that required him to relocate to Nairobi for several months. The opportunity was too good to pass up. Yet the timing felt precarious. Leaving Wanja during such a critical phase of their reconciliation weighed heavily on him. He agonized over the decision, torn between the professional opportunity and the fragile progress they had made as a couple. Surprisingly, it was Wanja who encouraged him to go. "We've come this far," she said with quiet determination. I believe we can handle this. We need to trust each other. Kamal. Even when it feels hard. Her words, infused with newfound strength, deeply moved him. With her blessing, he accepted the offer, vowing to stay connected no matter the distance. Kamal's departure marked a new phase of their journey. For Wanja, his absence was both a challenge and an opportunity. The house felt emptier than ever, and the nights stretched long and lonely. She immersed herself in her community work, finding solace in the lives she touched and the difference she made. Yet, every quiet moment served as a stark reminder of the fragile bond she was fighting to preserve. Despite the whispers that still haunted her, she stood resolute, determined to prove to herself and Kamal that she could rise above her past. In Nairobi, Kamal threw himself into his work but found his thoughts drifting constantly back to Wanja. The miles that separated them seemed insignificant compared to the depth of his longing for her. Every phone call, every text message, and every video chat became a lifeline, a thread that kept their connection alive. He realized how much he still loved her, how deeply he desired their marriage to succeed, and how much he respected her strength. One evening, as Wanja returned from her volunteer work, she was startled to see a familiar figure waiting outside her house. It was Kofi. His presence brought a rush of conflicting emotions: fear, regret, and an unsettling mix of anger and sadness. He had vanished months ago, leaving without a word. And now, here he stood, as if conjured by her lingering guilt. "I heard you're trying to fix things with Kamal," he said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "But do you really think you can make it right?" Wanja felt a chill but steadied herself. "I made a mistake, Kofi," she replied firmly. "But I'm doing everything I can to make amends. It's time for you to move on, just as I am." For a moment, his expression softened. "I wish you well, Wanja," he said quietly before walking away. As he disappeared into the distance, Wanja felt an unexpected sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted. A chapter of her life had finally closed. When Kamal returned from Nairobi 3 months later, he was met by a transformed Wanja. She stood before him, stronger and more confident, her eyes reflecting a newfound sense of purpose. She had faced her fears and demons, proving to herself that she could overcome them. Kamal, seeing the changes in her, felt a surge of admiration. Their reunion was tentative yet filled with hope. They spent hours sharing their experiences, recounting their fears and triumphs, and rediscovering the partnership they had once taken for granted. Slowly but surely, the walls between them continued to crumble. A few months later, the community decided to hold a celebration in Wanja's honor, recognizing her tireless efforts to uplift local women. That evening, as Kamal stood by her side, he felt a deep sense of pride. The woman who had once been vilified was now celebrated for her strength, resilience, and compassion. As they danced together under the stars, Kamal leaned in and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Wanja. You've shown me that love isn't just about passion, it's about commitment, forgiveness, and the courage to fight for what truly matters." She smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. For the first time in what felt like forever, they both felt at peace, ready to embrace the future they had fought so hard to rebuild together. Life is a series of choices, and every decision leaves a profound mark on our journey. Wanja and George. Despite the pain and turmoil, chose to confront their mistakes rather than run from them. They learned to forgive, not only each other but also themselves. They realized that love isn't just about passion, it's about commitment, empathy, and relentless effort to mend what is broken. Wanja's story teaches us a powerful lesson about temptation and consequences. It reminds us that true happiness doesn't come from fleeting moments but from genuine connection and enduring dedication to building strong relationships. When faced with challenges, instead of seeking solutions elsewhere, face them head-on together. Sometimes, healing takes more courage than walking away. Remember, every mistake can be a chance for growth if we're willing to confront and amend it. Thank you for following this heartfelt story. If this journey inspired you, hit the subscribe button to stay with us and discover more meaningful tales in the upcoming videos.